So we'll call the Urban Design Commission to order. Welcome, everyone. You've tuned into the August 11th version of the Urban Design Commission. And before we jump into our agenda, I'd like to invite Stefan from the city's IT office for some brief instructions on our virtual meeting.
Great, thank you. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their names if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming convention. Simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked the question. The chair will do their best to call on commission members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Goodhart, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. First order of business here is to approve the minutes from July 28th. Is there a motion for approval? Jessica, second? Second by Lois. Okay. Thank you very much. Item number 1, public comments. I did not see any registrations for general public comment for items not on the agenda. So we can move into the disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Russell, item number 2.
Number 2. Yep, number 2.
Okay, and then Rafiq?
2 and 3.
Items 2 and 3. Okay. Rafiq, Russell, and then Rafiq is also on 3. Thank you. That brings us then to the agenda overview. If you could brief us on tonight's agenda, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the Urban Design Commission. Just do a quick overview of tonight's agenda. There are 5 development-related discussions. The first 2, items 2 and 3, are related to the Village Mall. The first item is actually an informational presentation, and it's the CDA's overall master plan presentation. This is, again, informational, and although informational presentations are usually provided at the end of the agenda, in consultation with the chair, staff recommended to have this overview happen at the top of the agenda, as item 3 is also related to that, and that one is actually on the agenda for approval tonight. That is the Urban League development on the corner of the master plan site. Later in the agenda, the second public hearing we have is agenda item 4. This is 5535 University Avenue. This item was previously before the Urban Design Commission, as noted in the staff report, and there are some alterations that are going through the approval process again. UDC is an approving body on this item, as is the Plan Commission that will be scheduled to see it after the Urban Design Commission's action. As far as unfinished business, 575 Zor Shrine Place is on the agenda tonight. I would request, prior to the developer presentation, staff has a few comments that we'd like to give to clarify some of the Plan Commission's action. So I'd like to do that at the beginning of that meeting, or I'm sorry, at the beginning of that item, and then that item will be before you. And then finally, we have an informational presentation for Fire Station 6 at 825 Badger Road. So that is the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Okay, but before we move in then to item number 2, I would like just to remind the speakers and registrants that we do have a 3-minute limit on each speaker. We don't have a limit on the number of speakers, but if you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes, the commission then will have time to ask you follow-up questions if necessary. So that brings us then to agenda item number 2.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, looking for the unmute button. We have two speakers registered on agenda item 2. We have Peter Tan and Kevin Yeska registered in support and wishing to speak. And I will advance the slides in a moment.
And you are welcome to begin in any order as soon as the visuals are on the screen.
Cliff, could I give a quick intro?
I'm sorry, was that you, Jim?
Yes, Jim Whitney.
Sound like you got a face mask on or something.
I do,
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
in the
Jim,
office and we're required to wear a face mask when we're in the office. So
Okay. I still recognize you though.
okay.
Yeah,
good.
yeah. If you would like to do that, go ahead, and then we'll have our registrants give the presentation.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you, Cliff.
Mhm.
My name is Jim Whitney, architect with City of Madison Facilities Management Group. Just a short background on this project at Village on Park. Back in March, we met with DAT and kind of did an overview of some of this planning that we're doing here. Long-term planning and short-term for new development work that we've been looking at. And it was their recommendation at that we come to urban design and kind of present some of our concept ideas and develop a little bit more detailed master plan that goes a little bit beyond the neighborhood planning work that Jeff Rieger had been working on. So we took it another step further with Strang and Peter and Kevin and developed some ideas we would like to show you tonight to get some feedback that we can use as we move forward with the different components and different parts of the project. We have Peter Tan from Strang is here. He'll give you an overview of the concept planning ideas that he has. And then we have Kevin Yeska with us also from GSD Engineers. And he kind of has been working more on overall stormwater management plan that we kind of need to develop conceptually so that we can have overall campus-wide stormwater ideas and concepts in place as we develop the different components and different portions of this overall campus planning. So with that, I will turn it over to Peter to kind of give you a quick overview. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Jim.
Well, thank you, Jim. This is Peter Tan speaking. Just want to do a sound check. Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. Thank you very much. May I have the next slide, please? Okay, just to orientate everyone, north is up on this locator map, and the site for the village and park is outlined in yellow, and that's Park Street to the east of it, and Badger Road, and the belt line is just down to the south of it. Next slide, please. Just contextual site information. We've got 6 photographs of just out and around the site, some from Park Street, and then from the south and from the north of the site. So next slide, please. And you can see the number 1 is the view looking south along Park Street. Number 2 is view at Park Street looking west, and you can see that view towards the iconic entrance to the existing Village and Park Street Park building. That's an important thing, and we'll talk about that in just a moment in terms of creating a new axis from Park Street to that. Then Park Street at Hughes Place, looking northwest. We're right at the corner where the Urban League Hub building is going to go, right there in that corner. And then there's view from number 4 is a view along Hughes Place, looking northeast at the site. And then number 5 is the view on the site looking southeast. Now, this view is very important because we are proposing a brand new green space. This drive that you're looking down on this view number 5, we felt was pretty redundant actually in terms of circulation on the site, and we are proposing turning that into a really vibrant green space. So more on that later. And then view along Ridgewood Way looking southeast, just showing that end of the building. The existing building to the right here is proposed to be demolished there, and a new parking lot and some interesting kind of public art that we're proposing for that end of the building. Okay, next slide, please. Existing site plan, just to give you a sense of where everything is. Again, north is to the right on this. Next, please. Okay, so some big picture items. The reason why I have this slide is just the photograph on the upper right here that's what we're trying to create for this site, a vibrant pedestrian-oriented public space in the middle of this site. A few other things here. The overall design intent is to create, be consistent with the original master plan, create a town center for the south side. And a lot of the strategies are consistent with the South Madison plan as well. There are 4 phases to the master plan. We'll talk about that in just a moment. There's some sustainable design strategies, creating a new green landscape area, native landscapings, integrating solar power generation to the design of buildings, and then design that encourages public transportation and a pet bike culture. And just the spatial relationship to Park Street is really important. More on that later. And just next, please. Okay, so here's the master plan. Okay, the overall, this is all 4 phases of it. So just let me walk you through this. So here, right through the middle, now I'm going to try and use my words, so I probably can't point, correct? The proposed green space in the middle of the site, reworking that drive, that's one. The other thing is that access coming from Park Street, looking west to the iconic entrance for the Village and Park building. That's that access all the way straight from Park Street. We are creating that as well, clarifying that. And then we have the Urban League Hub building at the corner of Hughes Place and Park Street, right there. And a new parking structure, 6.5 level parking structure that anchors that end of the building, and be more on the facades. The conception of this building is that it become part of the urban fabric, and we have some photographs and concepts in future slides, and then. Actually, the first phase of this project is the removal of the north end of the building, and some parking stalls there, and then a future extension of Buick Street right through the site as well, and then in the north end of the site, some future affordable housing on the site, and that's that the yellow area is what we've kind of assigned for that. So next slide, please. So very quickly, phase 1, demolishing the north building on the Village and Park, and creating more parking right there. So that's the first phase. Next, phase 2 will be the Urban League Hub building, the southeast corner, and the parking structure. Next slide, please. Phase 3 is the future affordable housing at the north end of the site. And phase 4, next slide, please. Sorry. Extension of Buick Street through the site. So that gives you a build for the whole thing. So this is essentially the same slide as you saw in the beginning, the master plan. Okay, next, please. Next slide, please. Just massing. The Urban League Hub building anchors the street corner, on the southeast corner of the site, and the 6.5 level parking structure is just about the same height of the building, both about 56 stories high, 56 feet high. Okay, 4 stories for a typical office building, 6.5 stories at about 10.5 feet per level, adds up to about the same height. So they end up kind of being part of the urban fabric, holding the street edge. So next, please. The north end of the site, the north end of the building where we removed the building, we're proposing to have some public art. And here's some examples of that, very successful. This could potentially then be a great Instagram wall and really bring activity to the site. So that these are some concepts for that north end of the building. And it could become a magnet to the community, a place where you could have some small community events as well in the parking lot, and it could become a really vibrant public space potentially. Next, please. Then some ideas for the parking structure. Just want to give you a sense of the materials. The image on the left is the existing Village and Park main building, showing the material palette. Okay, it's a combination of brick, metal panel, glass, and the upper right corner image is one of City Madison's parking structures in Livingston Street. Again, same materials, kind of brick, perforated metal, and the incorporation of some public art on it as well. So the next few photographs, the lower right-hand corner is an example of some incorporation of public art and also some sustainable features. Upper left is colored glass panels, solar panels shading the roof. The lower left, solar panels on the facade itself. And then the 2 images on the right are some ideas of some public art that can be on the facade of a parking structure. Next, please.
Okay, we're past 8 minutes.
Okay. So I'm done with my part of it. Kevin Yeska, if you are willing to, let him speak. Kevin will talk about some of the civil engineering landscape related parts of the project.
Go ahead, Kevin. You have
Happy
3
to.
minutes.
I'll try to keep it to 2. Thank you for the time, everybody. Kevin with JSD. On the screen here, you have an existing utility plan for what's out at the village right now. I just wanted to highlight, essentially from a stormwater standpoint, we know that this is a fairly challenging site and that Hughes Place had some flooding issues actually in 2018, which has been corrected by the city since. But wanted to highlight just 2 different watersheds that really run across our property. Anything south of the Goodman Madison Library would be heading to the south, as you can follow the orange storm sewer line. Anything to the north really drains towards Ridgewood Way, which leads me into my next slide, please. This is a proposed stormwater management master plan, very high level conceptual program for 3 different underground systems that we're looking at. First one being with the parking lot build back project. That would be the item number 1, just north of the Village on Park. That's the parking lot. We're going to solve the stormwater management with an underground system there. I'll take you just to the right of that to area number 3. When the affordable housing component comes into play, we know that we'll probably have to solve that with likely a green roof or underground stormwater component as well. I would say that that's the most conceptual out of all the calculations that we've done so far. Then last but not least, watershed number 2 between the library and the hub. That large orange system is actually going to be below this central green space that Peter was highlighting. That will help us with the parking structure and any redevelopment that may happen with tearing up the parking lot that's out there now. I do want to just highlight too that the hub, the Urban Leagues project, is actually going to utilize a section of the village's property for their underground system as well. Next slide, please. Here's an existing landscape plan, not much to highlight there. Obviously, the photos you saw, the site itself is I would say fairly degraded, but there are still opportunities to maybe use some of the existing trees out there as we transplant. I see no reason why we couldn't do that. A lot of the species are great species and aren't too large to transplant at the moment. So next slide. And we'll get into the fun stuff. So just wanted to highlight a little bit more of what we're thinking for this central green space as we further develop it. Looking to improve all the parking island plantings, some of the foundation plantings of the Village on Park building and around that parking structure, but really some of the programs, if you want to jump to the next slide, within that central green space could be anything from those overhead pergolas, some form of branding with bench seating. This is the Fulton Street Market in Chicago imagery. Let's try and go vertical with some vine plantings on the parking structure itself. It's a great place for public art. Let's turn this maybe into a winter activity zone. Why not have a curling league occupy a section of this central green space, and then obviously overload it with plantings throughout the summer months as best we can. Next slide. I won't touch on this too much, but we have prepared a fire access exhibit and have started talking with Bill Sullivan, who feels very comfortable about the development and the proposals. So thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you. Julie, unless there were any late registrants, I think that was it for this item.
That's correct.
Okay, then I'll turn it over to the commissioners for any questions or comments. This is informational, so this is a great time to share your thoughts with the design team. Christian.
Yeah, the proposal, and I realize it's down the road to extend Buick Street. Exactly how far would that go? Is it just going to the back edge of that property and then turning north towards Ridgeway, or does it continue straight and go on to the apartment, Oak Ridge Apartments beyond there?
Yeah, I can speak to that. If you look in the South Madison plan, unfortunately we don't have a copy of it here, but Buick Street actually it shows up in one of the options in the South Madison plan. It goes like half a block more to the west, and then there's an arc that kind of goes a little bit more to the north, and then it connects through to an existing street. So basically, this is that link there. If you look at the South Madison plan, so it does go, and then it does arc over to the right, to a little bit more to the north, and then it connects through. If you look at the South Madison plan, but this is totally kind of filling in exactly kind of where it is shown in the South Madison plan.
Does that answer it, Christian? I know there was a locator map at the beginning. If you needed further explanation, we could flip to that.
No, I got it.
Okay. Any other questions, Christian, or comments?
No, thanks.
Okay. Shane, and then Jessica.
Thank you. So thanks for the presentation. I think one just observation or recommendation I would have would be to consider bike circulation internal to the site, but also how people are getting here, possibly on bikes, hopefully more so in the future. I see like one of the greatest opportunities with this plan is to de-emphasize the focus of surface parking and de-emphasize, your single occupant vehicles traveling to the site. So with that, I guess maybe there might be a little bit of a PR thing to kind of also consider with phase one, primarily taking down building and adding a surface parking lot until phase two happens. but I really like the green bar that you have through the site that connects kind of major components of the site. I wonder if, kind of to the same idea, to the same note of de-emphasizing surface parking, especially as it creeps right out to Park Street. I wonder if you at all considered taking that bar of parklet and bringing it out to Park Street and kind of like swapping it with some of that surface parking. I could even see potential for expanding that with maybe a loss of 20 parking stalls or fewer. So still maintaining kind of the overall quantity of car parking, but having something that activates the streetscape and kind of brought out to that forefront, let's call it the front yard, instead of surface parking. That's a question for the applicant.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, we are right in line with you in terms of the intent of connecting the site to Park Street, and we were trying to kind of basically what you see here is a balancing act between the number of parking stalls that we needed to kind of have on this site and having the connection. So the compromise that we are proposing here is that the connection is actually that drive, that axis, and it's a tree line kind of drive on axis with the entrance to the iconic entrance to Village and Park, and that could and so we were able to achieve that without. We'd love to be able to kind of then expand that and create green space to reinforce that axis too. But the compromise is that there was a need to hit a certain number of parking stalls. So that is kind of where we are at today. But certainly we are kindred spirits with you in terms of emphasizing that connection to the Park Street. But bit of insight into how we arrived at this today.
Shane, I would also highlight too, just that, the hub on the north side of the hub or right side of the hub on this screen, we are proposing a fairly wide plaza right there, which you'll see in the next agenda item, which may serve as that connection point. I recognize your point though, too, as that central connection would be really nice. Mm-hmm. It's like Peter mentioned, we have to try and get every single parking stall we can for this development. I think it's definitely something we can look closer at, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with you, and I think it makes complete sense. I think whatever you can do to really activate the Park Street frontage and de-emphasize sort of surface parking, and I don't know if it would certainly entail more site work and therefore more cost. But you might even be able to kind of swap some of those surface parking areas with the parklet to have the same balance of parking stalls, but something green space along that frontage of Park Street rather than car parking. But I think you're headed down the right track. Overall, I very much like this parklet spine that connects the various buildings through the site. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jessica, followed by Lois.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback with Shane. And I think that one of the hardest things about Park Street is the scale of it when you're a pedestrian or a biker. And so to enter this site, I wanted to piggyback with Shane on that to hopefully make it more pedestrian and bike oriented, especially for people maybe coming from the south from the bus transfer point, or even families coming from around the neighborhood. So those are pedestrians and strollers and tricycles and stuff. So I don't know if maybe berming along Park Street or something that just slows that down if there's room to berm along there and just, I don't know, make more of a green and human connection to the that nice strip you've got. It's in the center of the site, and when I look all around the site, if I were a pedestrian, I'd have to walk through some parking, it looks like, to get there. And I'm wondering if that's such a beautiful space, if that might reach out more to the edges of the site. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Lois?
Thanks for the presentation, Peter. So I recall, 15 years ago when this was first conceived, that there was a concern about the speed of traffic coming through when you have these straight shots of, vehicular traffic. And especially at the green space, I could see that would attract children. And then you have kind of a major entrance on access to the original building. And I'm wondering is there any consideration for slowing down traffic, kind of heading straight through? Or is there a way, I know you have this nice axial view, but if you offset the traffic through the library parking or the hub parking side, would it slow traffic down? I kind of worry about pedestrians engaging in that green space, having cars kind of shooting straight through.
The two ways of looking at this, right? To create a kind of a labyrinth where cars kind of move around, and there's that way of creating pedestrian friendliness, pedestrian safety. Sometimes a more predictable traffic pattern is in many ways a more effective way of traffic calming, and the key is to design those pedestrian crosswalks where the pedestrian crosses the driveways, and if they all lined up, I think it actually gives a much better measure of predictability, and predictability is actually very important when it comes to pedestrian safety. And so that would be our philosophy in terms of looking at this. We have where the sidewalk crossings are, they are carefully marked, they are right there, they're right angles, they are as narrow as we can make them for traffic calming purposes. And to the extent we can put in we can include the characteristics that you'd find in a Wonerf, as they have in the Netherlands, right? That by these visual cues in terms of the materials they use in the paving, that this is a space that belongs to the pedestrian, and the vehicles are actually the outsiders here. And I think that there are ways in which we can kind of create those visual cues to kind of create pedestrian safety, as opposed to kind of geometrically kind of create a labyrinth. That would be our philosophy going ahead with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that. It's you that predictability. You don't want somebody coming around a corner and not seeing a pedestrian too. But you're using, I would assume, like some tabletop type, ways to slow down cars, and like you said, the visual cues, but then also potentially some, like tabletops or speed bumps or something like that as well.
Okay.
Other than that, I think it's a nice plan. I remember the parking challenges, and I can see that's going to be worked out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? The more the better at this presentation. Okay, well, certainly it looks like a number of details could really bring this master plan into reality and make it a real pleasant place to both walk, ride a bike, and navigate vehicular traffic, densify it. The only thing I would add is the part of the presentation that showed public art, particularly on parking structures, with that parking structure being so close to the street, that the art be really integrated into the design of the parking structure and not just a mural painted on it. And there were some good examples in the presentation of how to achieve that. And so hopefully that gets carried through into reality when that phase is implemented. Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for the presentation. And we look forward to a real building being built there, which actually brings us to item number 3, new construction for the 4-story multi-tenant building.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, technical difficulties on my end. I had a few too many things open on my screen and I couldn't get the unmute button to activate. So I apologize to the Commission. For this item, we do have several speakers. I will just list them off right now. I believe these are all members of the development team. We have registered B. Wolf, Joseph Lee, Kirk Brzezowski, Ruben Anthony, and Edward Lee, all registered in support wishing to speak. And then we have Kevin Yeska, registered in support and available to answer questions on this item. And I will share the screen in just a moment.
Yep. Thank you, Kevin. I think we're going to start off with Ed Lee, who's representing the Urban League, is going to have a quick overview of the project itself and the importance of it. And then we'll have Brian Wolf, who will be going through the actual project plans themselves. And then I think the rest of us are really just here for, as you said, to answer questions. So with that, Ed, if you want to start.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check. I know Ruben was trying to get here on time. If he's here, he'll start. If not, I will.
Ruben, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself. There you go.
All right. Hi, Ed. I just got here, so I'm a little bit unsettled, and I'm on my phone, not on my computer. But I'll go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, good. Hey, so thanks for giving us an opportunity to present once again to your commission. You see up in front of us, there is, again, a rendition of what we want this Black Business Hub to be. We have made quite a bit of progress on our design since we last met. And so I don't know I can't remember what level of detail we walked through before, but if you can bring up the next slide. So as you can see, where this slide shows the location of our actual facility, and it shows the surrounding area. But it shows that the project is actually located on Park and Hughes, and then it's actually in the Village on the Park, and it shows other amenities that are in that area, like the Alex G's project on the hill. It also shows the library and other attributes. Next slide, please. The architects, definitely have looked at various architecture in the area to kind of make sure that we are, to make sure that the architecture is not mismatched for what we have in the area. But the project again is going well, and we are expecting to keep moving. In October, we expect to have a really good start, on the project. But I just got a note from Ed that I can turn it over to the architects. So at this point, let JLA walk through the other slides, and I'll be around for questions.
All right, thank you, Ruben. This is Brian. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We can take it to the next slide, if you will. Thank you. This is an update to our informational. This is the same site plan, but I'd like to thank Peter and Kevin for the introduction to the master plan. It will save me time. Again, the site is located, north is to the right, in the southeast part of the Villager shopping area, just off South Park and Hughes. You can go to the next slide. Again, same as last time, the entries into the building are the same as you'll see in some of these plan updates. It's just the form that has changed. We'll review some of the changes that have happened since last time. Again, there's 6 entries, one from Hughes, one from South Park to enter the main atrium off the Hub Plaza, the Hub entry off the Outdoor Plaza on the north, which is to the right, a retail entry, a tenant 1 entry, and then the building entry that would serve the parking structure and the rest of the Villager shopping center. Next slide. Quickly, it's an updated landscape plan. As I think as some members of the council were referring to that connection, which I think we'll talk a little bit in the renderings, that connection could exist and does exist on the north side of the Hub building. We have a fair amount of setback there. I think we're working with nearly 11 feet at the west side of the north side of the building and roughly 15 to 16 feet on the west side of that building with an overhang. So there's a fair amount of gathering space, and it really is meant to bring individuals in off of Park into an outdoor plaza where they can mingle, or there might be an event, or we can go into the atrium space. And then if there are any questions in landscape, and I think Kevin is here to answer any questions, but I think it's in the same intent, a similar intent in terms of landscape as the rest of the master plan. There might be some unique instances where there's transplanted trees or existing trees that will remain on the perimeter or outside of the property line. Next slide. Again, photometric. If there's anyone that has any questions regarding this, I would be happy to answer them, but I'll keep going for sake of time. First floor plan, again, the atrium really is the front porch or the hub of the hub, so to speak. And all of these tenant spaces kind of wrap around that central atrium that's off of Park Street, with one tenant, major tenant on the first floor. Next slide. And a number of other tenants on the second and third floors. Atrium open to below on the second floor. You can go to the next slide. One third floor tenant, and then the fourth floor is also public and private, where the community can get up off of grade and experience the city from an outdoor terrace. So there could be an event there. There's a moderate amount of green roof that's visible from both corridors and terraces. And also a small outdoor terrace serving a private tenant that is on the south of the building. Okay, next slide. And then here's just a brief roof plan showing the screening of the rooftop units. Next slide. We can probably skip through the black and white elevations. I spent a little time on the materiality. We're proposing to use what is called a Ceraclad. It's a ceramic coated panel. You can get them in many types of textures and patterns. And to adhere to the black aesthetic, which is really about pattern and drama, color, relationship from indoor to outdoor, we really wanted to find a material that could handle all of those things for that had relatively good warranties and easy installation. So in the renderings, you can go to the next slide. We can probably skip through the elevations. If there's any questions, we can come back. Here we're showing the Ceraclad. It's hard to render, obviously, but what we're trying to do is use two different types of the material and pattern, a larger format kind of striped pattern and a smaller one. And we really highlight for that dramatic effect, the entry point, that overhang, which changed a little bit from the first design, but still has the strength and composition as the first design. We went from a curtain wall to storefronts just to save a little bit on cost and lead times. Next slide might be a better example of how we're using the material. So on floors 3 and 4, we're using a larger pattern, horizontal. Since we're up off of grade, we're not so intimate with it. It can be larger. And where we're at the first and second floor, we use a smaller pattern. And this pattern really is vertical on the first and second floor, giving a shift in pattern, the drama of the shading and shadowing of the product. Next slide. And we're coming around kind of northeast from Hughes Place. You can see how the material of the patina-like material comes down and through and into the first floor. It's kind of splitting the two pieces apart. And then the fenestration compositionally kind of moves again, becomes a little bit more utilitarian along the western exposure. Again, we highlight the entry with kind of a red portico. Next slide. And here again is kind of a western elevation looking more. You can see the entry on the left there, the overhang. Kind of a visual cue as we walk around and through the plaza and along the green space. And that green space kind of moves into the west side of along the building. Again, the red portico is an indication for entry, kind of a dramatic entry from the west side for those coming from the parking structure. That might be the last slide.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have, let's see, we still have Kirk and Joe registered to speak, I believe.
Yeah, I've used up my time. I'm good.
Okay. And Joe, anything to add?
Joe, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself. There you go.
I do. Thank you. Nope, I'm just here to answer questions.
Okay. Great. Kevin, I think that is all of the registered speakers.
Julie, are there any updates to the original list?
Nope, we're good to go.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Then I will turn it over to the commission members for questions or comments. We had very positive feedback last time, and the project's substantially the same with a few tweaks as were explained to us here. So if anybody would like to make some comments, ask some questions, or a motion, now's the time. Shane.
Thanks. Just one very small comment in response to, I believe, a staff report comment that was made about the small piece of the landscape plan that has stone mulch instead of bark mulch. I think it's along the south edge of the project, if I remember right. And I would just recommend, using bark mulch for the health of the plant and to match everything else that you appear to be using around the site. That's all.
You drive a tough bargain, Shane. Russell.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I really like this project. I have one small question. I just like to say why I like it. I just really appreciate the way the forms and massing have been arranged here, and some of the depths of the canopies really to. I think this building is well oriented and really responds to really the solar orientation of the project. So I'm really glad to see that. It's really exciting for me.
Thank you.
So I would like to ask about the lighting on the roof, the photometric plan, and is the intent of some of that lighting to actually give some visibility to some of the mechanical screening up there? Is there any aesthetic goal of that lighting, or is it purely just maintenance lighting for maintenance access and that sort of thing up there?
I'm sorry, are you referring to the rooftop of level 3, that lighting?
Right, page E001, Kevin, page 7 out of 21 on the presentation.
Was that the photometric plan?
That's the photometric plan, yes. And I may be interpreting it wrong, but I'm interpreting some of the lighting that was clouded as being kind of the rooftop mechanical area.
It's a good question. It's on level 3, so it's on the mechanical is actually on the roof of level 4. This is off of this is the roof of level 3. So this is where
the outdoor terrace. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the green, what is clouded is it may be a little bit too far to the north. It probably should come in off of the roof line a little bit. But there's intent to have some sort of some modicum amount of lighting for events, whether it's off of the railing or off of the building, preferably not on the building. So that is what I think that is illustrating.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it's illustrating. We just clouded it just to kind of, because it was like, why is there light on top of the building? So we just wanted to emphasize the reason for it.
Okay, and thank you for the clarification. No issue with it. Yeah, I'm good. Those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christian.
Yeah, in the presentation, you mentioned a couple areas with green roof potential, but in the introductory text, the paragraph that addressed that sort of waffled a little bit on your commitment to that, and I don't remember the exact wording, but something along the lines of that you were looking to use it if it was possible, but it seemed like you were leaving open the possibility that that might be left by the wayside. And I was wondering if you could clarify that. It would be nice to see that stay in the project if possible.
Yes, good question, and thank you for the question. So I think early on when we were looking at stormwater, it was much more intensive in terms of a green roof. So now that a lot of that is being mitigated by the underground that is part of that green space, we are going more to like a 4-inch tray. So the intent is to stay with green roof along areas of terrace and corridor where we have that kind of immediate or more intimate connection with the roofscape. It may morph a little bit from what you see, but the intent is to retain what we have, which is, I think, roughly Don't quote me, but I think it's around 1,200 square feet.
Very good. I just want to compliment you too on doing a pretty nice job with the plantings. I realize you don't have a lot of space around the building to do the plantings, but a pretty nice selection. It was nice to see a few interesting species that tend to get overlooked, and people go with the same palette constantly. I like the fact that you found places to work in the red twig dogwoods, which I think, in the wintertime, that's going to be a nice little color echo from the red accents of the building. So well done on that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Christian. And I just wanted to clarify too for Shane, we are using shredded hardwood bark mulch everywhere on the project. There's just a 8-inch drip edge that we have stone mulch for on that south facade. As that water drips off the building, we were hoping it could drip into a stone mulch bed and not make a mess for that patio. So we'd like to hold that in the project if possible. No plantings are proposed within that small strip of stone. So just wanted to clarify that. And I can add a detail our next go around for staff's review.
Okay, thank you. I see Shane succumbing to the logic. Jessica.
I just had a question about the name, the Hub, because we saw there's a hub downtown too, right? Which is a residential tower. And there's another project proposed called the Hub 2. Just wondering does anybody have a reaction to that or get any confused by that at all?
It's just a placeholder right now.
Oh, that name?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because the Hub has a kind of connotation already in Madison, and I was just curious about that. All right, thank you. Lovely, lovely design.
Thank you.
Okay. So is that it? I see your hand still raised, Jessica. Anything else?
No, that was
okay.
it.
And then Lois and then Russell.
It's a nice project. I wasn't here for the informational. I'm a little disappointed you couldn't do curtain wall because I really loved that vertical detailing you had at the entrance, but this is just as nice looking. I think you really successfully did a 4-faced building, which is very difficult, and you got the entrance near where people would be entering. I was going to make a motion until I saw Russell's hand go up, so I'll hold on to the motion.
Thank you nonetheless.
You can still make the motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion for final approval.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second it, and
okay.
with the just, I guess, to capture the clarification that it is majority shredded wood bark mulch. And okay. For the record, Shane's okay with the drip edge stone.
Okay. All right. So we have a second on the motion. I see Alder Alboris is while he's driving. Are you driving to the site?
I was just seconding the motion.
Oh, okay. Just keep your eyes on the road. Okay. I don't know if we should be having meetings while driving. Anyway. So any further discussion on the motion by people sitting in a building? Okay, no further discussion. All right, if I see no hands raised, then by unanimous consent, you have final approval. Thank you very much for the nice building. We're looking forward to it and the rest of the villager to become reality.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, so that gets us to item number 4, which is 5535 University Avenue. Some of us may remember this one from a few years ago. Others, it may be a kind of a new thing.
And just to note, we have one registered speaker, and it's the project architect, Kevin Burrow, as registered to speak on this one. And I will pull up the slides in just a moment.
All right, good evening. This is Kevin Burrow with Canothian Bruce Architects. I want to thank you for your time this evening to revisit this project that was before UDC back in 2017 and 2018 with regards to a new mixed-use development for the repurpose of the former Brennan's Market site at the corner of University Avenue and Capitol Avenue, as you can see on your screen here. The reason this project has not moved forward with regards to construction basically has to do with the commercial space and the viability of this project to move forward by having tenants within that commercial space. So we're proposing to do with this redevelopment or revision of this plan is to slightly reduce the amount of commercial space to make it financially feasible to construct and build this building immediately, basically. Upon approval, we would like to start construction next spring if possible. So next slide, please. What I have before you is basically a before and after. So previously, this project was approved with commercial space on first floor of about 5,600 square feet. Then a portion of the first floor was also open air parking underneath the building and an access drive out to University Avenue, which would be a right in, right out only, but an access point on University Avenue. Next slide, please. With the new design, we have reduced the commercial space down to about 2,700 square feet. So we no longer need that additional parking on first floor. So we're able to fill that in with additional housing units and then actually create green space along the south side of the property as shown in that green bar. Next slide, please. Here's the overall landscaping plan where now we used to have a driveway along the south side out to University. So we're able to add additional green space and additional trees onto our property here. Then also as part of this development, we're able to create a larger patio space on the north end where the commercial space does exist. So we can create an outdoor gathering space for the commercial user, whoever that may be, with direct connection from the handicap parking stall around to the front of the building. Next slide. This is a previously approved first floor plan where you can see the whole end cap of the building was basically earmarked for commercial space. Then we had that open air parking on the southwestern corner of the building. Next slide. With that, now we're able to fill in approximately 3 units on the southwest end and 3 more additional units on the northeast end. And the commercial space still has the end cap and the frontage along University Avenue. So we picked up 6 units total from the original 60. Next slide. The basement level of the previously approved plan had 52 parking stalls. Next slide. We're able to increase the underground parking with an additional 5 stalls. We're up to 57 parking stalls now within the basement by being able to create that patio space also on the outdoor of the commercial space. Next slide. The overall floor plans for second and third are unchanged. So these are the existing and proposed to continue. Next slide. Third floor remains the same. And then finally, the fourth floor plan. Next slide, please. This is also the same, but I just wanted to reiterate that we do step the building back along University Avenue and are able to create the outdoor roof gathering space. There's a communal space in the southeast corner of the building with a large rooftop plaza. And then those units that front along University will also have a generous patio space, and they are stepped back such that the building appears only to be a 3-story building directly along the sidewalk along University Avenue. Next slide. The exterior renderings are basically very much the same. This is a previously approved plan. Next slide. With the newer design, basically we infilled with additional landscaping where there used to be more commercial frontage to sort of frame out the entry to the residential entry, which is just beyond the large green grouping towards the middle of this rendering. And you can get a glimpse of that patio space that we're creating on that northeast end. Next slide. Again, frontage of the previously approved design. I'm going to jump to the next slide. The new design is basically the same as far as all the exterior architecture and detailing goes. but we are, as I mentioned, able to provide additional landscaping along the front there. Next slide. Here's the back view of the parking lot on the interior parking area of the previous design. Next slide. And again, the architecture is pretty much the same, but we are now able to create that patio space on the side of the building with additional landscaping screening as well. Next slide. Here's another view of that looking up University Avenue along Capitol Avenue, and you can see that gathering space. And then the final slide here for next slide is sort of a close-up view of that space where we are able to create. So you can see the clear pedestrian connection from the back parking area around to the main entry of the space. And then this portion of the site has also been revised to provide a bus parking location for the new bus stop, which the city would like to relocate directly in front of this building. So basically, the overall architecture is very much the same. It's just a small reduction in commercial space and enhancement of additional units to the building. With that, I can open up to any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Christian.
Yeah, I remember this back when I first started on the commission, where I was mainly just taking it in, but I remember there was a lot of concern about that driveway going out onto University Avenue. So I think that's a big plus that has been omitted. I like the increased landscaping out front. Looks like a nice selection of plants. I do have a question on that back property line for the development team. I know there's a retaining wall back there. Is that entire length of that, which runs most of the length of that property, is that being retained? Is it being rebuilt? And the plantings, excuse me, along there, I mean, it looks like the actual property line extends to the south of that retaining wall. And I guess I have a question about the 30 or 40 some arborvitaes that are running along there. Or is there existing ones that are going to be removed and then replanted with all the same new ones, or what's going on with the retaining wall and the landscaping along that?
The retaining wall will be maintained as best as possible, but we are anticipating having to do some work to it. So we're same with the landscaping plantings. It's the intention to create this screening element or maintain as much as possible, but to ensure that there is a solid screening to the residential properties to the southeast. So those could be all new plants if necessary, depending upon how the sequencing of construction goes and what survives. So we just wanted to sort of reassure everyone that the screening will be maintained.
Okay. I don't know how much space is between the actual property line and that retaining wall. It looks fairly minimal. If you do have to replace that and go with a solid wall of arborvitaes there, a different cultivar than Techni might work better. Those can get pretty broad based, and especially where that swings close to the parking lot, might be protruding out into the parking spots in not too many years. You might want to consider emerald or Holmstrup or one of the more narrow arborvitaes if you're going with a wall of green effect along there. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? suggestions. Shane?
Thanks. For the most part, it seems like all of the changes are positive changes relative to the existing proposal. One thing I saw that kind of caught my eye was just the 2 feet of vehicle clearance from some of those parking stalls to the garage entry. So 2 feet for the overhang feels a little tight for vehicles, and maybe just wanting to create another foot or 2 if possible of separation so that front bumper isn't bumping into the garage entry wall. But otherwise, I think my only other comment was in one of the renderings, there were red bike racks out front, which felt a little foreign to the rest of the project, where you had darker colored railings and really nothing that seemed to match or correspond with the red on the building. I don't know if that was just a rendering thing or if that's the actual proposal, but I'd suggest going with a color that's a little more in tune with the rest of the vertical site components and the railings.
Yeah, no, those would definitely be color matched. That was just, it was a rendering thing, but to also help accentuate that they exist.
Sure, got it. That's all for me. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Jessica?
Oh, yeah. Question about the traffic. I assume that the city is part of moving that bus stop, but it's right at that corner, and people coming out of this new building, many will be taking a right and then another right on University, and the new bus stop is right there right away. I was just curious if there's been discussion on that or acknowledgement of that. And when this was Brennan's, that drive was hard to come out of anyway, because it's already marked for 2 lanes for turning left or right. And anyway, kind of a bugger of a little corner there. And I'm curious if you've had conversations with city traffic about that.
Yeah, the city has dictated this location for the new bus stop. It is further from the corner to provide a little bit of relief. And then we are insetting onto our property so that the bus is out of traffic when it is parked and people are coming and going. So it has been coordinated to the best that we can at this location.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay. I do have a comment. Kevin, if you wouldn't mind going to the proposed elevation on University Avenue. I think that's toward the end there. Now that the retail has gotten smaller, I'm just thinking that it there you go. It could benefit, I think, from on the retail on the right side, could benefit from more distinct expression for the commercial first floor. You have you have that little canopy there, and it kind of matches the canopy at the residential entrance there in the middle. And I'm just wondering if maybe you get rid of that, or just have a consistent signage band, or maybe a different expression of the piers in between the storefront or something, just to give that a little bit of a distinct expression than the residential units that are on the east side, and certainly the entry canopy for the units right there in the middle.
Yeah, we could look to modify how that signage presents itself, and with regards to that canopy element. I hear what you're saying. It's a good point that we do want to differentiate this, make sure it stands out so that it is viable and interesting for potential tenants to come and lease this space.
Yeah, something that could wrap around.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting anything really bizarre, but just something a little bit different than where the people are living.
Good point. Thank you.
Rafiq and then Russell.
Yeah, I just had a comment. If you can put that same picture back up. I was kind of not concerned, but the balcony treatment bothered me. I don't know. They're more like outdoor rooms because they're framed so heavily. I get, when I look at this picture, this elevation, I get the composition, like the, you know, the void next to the glazing. So it kind of, you know, I get that language as it reads across, but I just feel like those balconies are so blocked. With the exception of the two that are outboard, it just seems very, just like a dark space, and the views are kind of obstructed because it's so heavy. Like, I get the frame. I see what you're trying to do, and I like that concept, but it's just, I feel like those pillars or those columns or those frames or edges are so massive on two sides that it's just blocking so much of the view and light. So I don't know if there's a way to, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm the only person that feels that way, but it's something about those balcony spaces just don't quite hit for me.
Well, maybe Kevin could explain the, you know, what the experience is like on the inside. What are the materials, you know, on the inside of those corners, and you know, and how much space and how deep they really are. I don't know if we need to see an enlargement of the floor plan or whatever, but yeah, I mean, certainly it could be, especially facing north, something that you know, keeps a lot of daylight into the unit.
Right. The interior of those are finished off in the same siding material as shown on the exterior. It is open on both sides. We do have this column element, as Rafiq correctly pointed out, to create the contrast between, or to basically frame these out and balance it with the bedroom windows that are adjacent to it for that same apartment. So it does create an outdoor room, so to speak, but it is open on both sides. We could look at possibly thinning it up, but we were trying to balance it with the mass of the windows adjacent to it to create an overall balance for that element.
Okay, and I'm looking at the plan, and I do see that at least on the west side, it opens to a one bedroom living area that also has a window right next to it. So there is additional daylight coming into that unit on the corner there.
Correct.
Rafiq, do you have any other follow-up on that?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Lois?
Yeah, I like the project. I can see what Rafiq is saying. I'm wondering how much of that is just from the rendering, the shadowed rendering, and when you're standing inside on that balcony, if you'll feel a little bit more sheltered from the traffic on such a busy street. So I think there's kind of a double-edged sword with that, right? The more exposure you have, the more exposure you have to a lot of traffic and less privacy. So I can see the pros and cons to it, but I do like the rhythm of those areas. And I was going to make a motion. So if do we have anybody else with their hand up, or else I'll make a motion for final approval.
No other hands are right. Well, Russell just raised his hand. Oh, he's saying that he's got a vaccine. Okay, so that is a motion, seconded by Russell. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Okay, no further discussion on the motion. I see no other hands raised or objections. Then you are granted final approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Looking forward to that old Brennan's being torn down finally. Okay. Next, we move to the unfinished business, 575 Zora Shrine Place. And as Kevin requested, I'm going to invite him to give us some opening remarks on this item before we turn it over to the design team.
Thank you, Chair, and I can certainly answer any questions. I want to just summarize the information that I included in the staff report about the UDC's role. As you'll recall, this was at a UDC meeting about a month or so ago, and the UDC made an advisory recommendation to the Plan Commission as required by the zoning code. And essentially, the Urban Design Commission had two primary requests as part of their advisory motion. One was to increase the amount of green space within the parking areas, and the second one was to reorient one or both of the buildings with the intent of creating a more enclosed courtyard space. That information was shared with the Plan Commission, and it was debated at the Plan Commission, recognizing the Urban Design Commission's motion. As part of the Plan Commission's approval, they approved it specifically with the condition that maintain the building orientation as proposed. They did request that it does come back for the other details to be considered by Urban Design Commission prior to final sign off at the staff level. But I did want to note that their specific approval did approve the design and the building the building orientation as included in the packet. I can certainly answer any questions after the public hearing, but I wanted to just note that up front before the discussion began.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if there aren't any other questions, I would just note the speakers on this item. We have a few speakers from the development team, including Natina James, David Stahl, and Mark Laverty, all registered in support and wishing to speak. We have then three speakers, I believe, all from the development team available to answer questions, including Michael Jones, Carter Lanzer, and Jamie Perrin. And so those are the speakers that I have listed. Julie, do you have any updates at this point?
No, that's exactly what I've got as well.
Okay. Thank you. And I will pull up the slides in just a moment.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Good evening. This is Mark Laverty with Saturday. Thank you, commissioners, for having us back to discuss our project. I do want to thank Kevin Furkow for helping us on our resubmission and with the unique approval that we received, helping us make sure we were providing the right information for this presentation tonight. Joining me on the call today is David Stahl, who will be going through the changes in more detail. We have available for questions Natina James, who's on the design team, and Michael Jones from Cunningham, who is our landscape architect. As mentioned, Carter Lanzer from Bierbicker, who is our civil engineer, is available. We also brought Jamie Perrin from Saturday. She's the president of Saturday and oversees our property management team. Since our main changes revolve around parking, she's available to provide any insight on the resident experience and how future residents view parking. We greatly appreciate the feedback we heard at our last meeting. We went back to the plans to address the overarching feedback to look at minimizing parking and replacing with green space. By doing that, and by your guidance, we were able to remove 24 parking stalls and convert those to green space. With that, I'll turn over to David Stahl with Cunningham, who's our lead designer, to show the areas that have been switched, along with highlighting how we're exceeding the open space requirements in city code. Thank you again for your consideration tonight.
All right, this is David Stahl with Cunningham. Thank you for allowing us to come back. Next slide, please. This shows the site in its current conditions and how it will be broken into 3 parcels, with the north lot being the future right-of-way. Next slide. These are the topics we're going to be covering, specifically the parking, the green space, and additional trees. We also have some further renderings that were requested just to see a few more locations within the site. Next slide, please. All right, starting with parking. When we were back last, lot number 3, which is the west lot, has 216 units, and we had 237 parking stalls. It was requested that we bring it down to the minimum of 1 per unit, which we did. That offered up 21 available stalls on that side. In lot 4, we had 263 required. We had 266, and we also reduced that for a total of 24. Our hope is where those green areas in the center, we will remove the parking lot and make that design in that area a little more interesting. It does that it is a fire lane, so it is required that we continue to have access through that area, but the idea is to give a little bit of rhythm and play back and forth. Right now, if you add the two, we are right at the code required 1 per unit. The north lot allows us to get the market demand currently of 1 per bedroom. The idea that in the short term, that works and the site is balanced out. In the future, as car dependency reduces and the mall to the east goes under changes and we reconnect the street grid at that point, the hope and thought is that will no longer be needed for parking. Next slide, please. There are some other areas and requests for some clarification. We will have a car share program and we will reserve those spots right at the front. So easy to see from people come and go and where to park. We will have electric charging stations outdoors. We have them on both lots along the north end, one in each, one area in each lot. We also will have indoor parking. Most of that will be underneath the building. We have ADA parking. There's a question regarding where would they be parked. While it's used for a parking lot, they will be right adjacent at the entry, closest to the ramp. In the future, they'll probably move closer to along the charging stations. And lastly, we have our bike parking dispersed throughout near the entries, both at the north and south. We'll have more than the minimum. We'll have, we see this as a big biking town, and especially when the future connection comes through, the bike path connection, we will utilize that. Next slide, please. We had questions regarding lot coverage and usable open space. Just to quickly summarize, in lot 3, the max percentage allowed is 80%. We have 67.6, so under that. Usable open space required, that's 140 square feet per unit. Required, we need 30,240. We have provided 52,993. Lot 4 is similar in percentages of coverage, and the usable open space, we are exceeding the required 36,000 with 53,900. Next slide, please. The last time we were here, our site plan was black and white. Hopefully this close-up shows a little bit more activity. You can see what our open spaces and courtyards will be. We have the Mendota pool deck, which has our pool, usable by both buildings, and it does bleed down into the landscape below. There is parking below the pool deck, so we are trying to enclose as much parking as we can. In the center between the two buildings, we have our Badger Alley. So on game days, while during the week it could be accessed as a drive, that would be closed off. We could bring in food trucks and other activities could take place. We have a rendering of that. And then quieter courtyards would be the Monona Club Deck, which has some areas for shade and grilling, and the Wing Grill Lounge also has some activity spaces. Next slide, please. There were questions about increasing the tree count. We have lined the perimeter specifically to the north because that was the tightest to one of the parking lots. The east side, there was a question regarding a very large maple that will remain. And there were a number of larger trees on that edge already. We have supplemented them with additional plantings, and then a few along the west side where the future bike trail connection will be. Overall, we added 29 trees, all ornamental or canopy. Next slide, please. We have updated our renderings. Here's a view upon arrival. We have eliminated some of the trees in the foreground so we can see the building. Next slide. Here we have our Badger Alley from pedestrian view height. And if we go to the next slide, it's the same one, but up a little bit just to explain the space a little better. We'll have a changing in paving patterns, be it brick paver or some other type of colored concrete. We're still looking into how to best define and design that area. But this is an area that can really bring the two buildings together and have a usable space for a number of gatherings. Next slide. This is the northeast corner. You can see another one of the trees we have shadowed in because it was covering up a lot. But the idea is to green up the perimeter as much as possible. And we will have plantings and planters along the base to soften that edge where the building meets grade. Next slide. A shot of the pool deck or Mendota pool deck. Next slide. This is the southeast corner. Again, a tree being removed so you can actually see the building, but hopefully the feeling when one goes around the building on the perimeter is more campus-like and multi-building, with open spaces to be experienced as you go around the site. With that, that's our brief presentation. We're more than happy to answer any additional questions you have. If it's specific to the plantings, Michael Jones, our landscape architect, is available to get into the specifics. Thank you.
All right. Any other speakers from the development team at this time? No? Okay. Questions or comments, commissioners? Russell.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back. Nice presentation. The renderings clearly show, I just want to say I appreciate the added detail here and clarification about the Badger Alley Plaza and the treatment of the drive in that area. I think that's a really strong signal and kind of empowering the pedestrians to kind of use that space a little more, which I know was part of your design intent, really minimize car driving area and sort of maximize pedestrian use of the site. And I think this is a nice move, in my opinion. The rendering shows the brick extending out past the crosswalk clearly into the drive, whereas the landscape plans show that brick terminate. I have two questions for you. One, what is the intent? Are you planning to extend it out to the drive? And two, you seemed maybe a little bit unclear as of right now what you want to do. I would just ask you, can I just politely ask for it to be brick instead of a colored concrete? I guess that would be my vote I might pitch to my commission team here, but I'd like to hear the design team kind of respond to those two questions, please.
I can certainly answer. As for the rendering, that is a rendering miscommunication. Our in-house renderer made the whole street in this view that way. I think it would be a better design to keep it just within that area to better orient vehicular circulation around versus over it. Once you drive over it, then you feel you can drive everywhere. So the idea is like the site plan to stop it right at that north edge where the car is in the rendering. As for brick pavers versus stamped concrete or others, the reason I hesitate is often with plows, we are in the north, they can become problematic. So I was leaving it open. Mark, if you've had experience on your sites one way or another, I'd be open. I do like the look, but I do know that this is also real term reliability and maintenance.
Oh, we can specifically speak to that. We have a project that opened up here in the Twin Cities where we had a Woon Earth design and had pervious pavers. I'll say some pervious, some impervious. That is long-term a area concern for us. You can work with plow companies; they can do their best, but at the end of the day, you have to go and specifically if you think of crosswalk areas, these are areas where people are walking. It is a concern, and then it's also we're already replacing pavers several years in. This is something that when we approached that design, we knew it would be an issue, and it's coming to light. So yes, appreciate the comment there, and that's why we're trying to minimize that as much as we can.
Okay. That answered my questions. Thank you.
Okay. It looks through the renderings that the trees are like a 6 or 8 inch caliper tree. I don't see on the presentation where that tree size upon planting is articulated. Are we looking at 1.5, 2 inch? I mean, and I guess I would ask Christian and Shane if we can really expect these trees to get this tall in maybe Shane's lifetime. So I guess the first question
Michael,
is what
I can
size
answer that.
trees are you planting in here?
I would propose to plant what is kind of like city minimum. Usually it's about 1.5 inch caliper to 2 inch, depending on the species. I think a lot of times the ornamentals are about 1.5 inch caliper, but it would be code minimum for sure. And a lot of times you probably wouldn't want to plant a 6 inch just because of growth. They get a little stunted at first. So just thinking about, if we want them to really be successful, it'd be kind of best actually smaller than larger at first to be planted.
And I can add a comment as well. When we give direction to the design team, we do want to see what this is going to look like down the road. Part of it is you see projects where trees seem to be conflicting with the building as they grow over time. And that's why we prefer to say, okay, what is this going to look like once they mature a little bit?
A lot, you mean? Okay.
Fair point.
Russell.
Thanks. Different topic. I don't know the disruption to your design and your program to do this, but I keep looking at the green space that's on grade that's down below the Mendota deck and the Monona Club deck, and I was trying to picture myself using that space, knowing that everybody else is up there on the deck, and I wonder if you'd consider trying to get. I understand why it's located there just based on the way this building laid out, but is it possible to get that green space, or have you considered getting it into the courtyard? And I think this is a very small. It goes a very small in the direction of kind of our previous comments about making that protected courtyard maybe a more livable, usable space. So had you considered trying to get that green square footage into the courtyard instead?
I can answer
Sure, I know.
that.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
David,
Mark.
thank
Right now, the courtyards are over the parking, and they're more or less 5 feet above grade where the parking and the sidewalks are. Right now, we step at where the parking actually stops, and we terrace down with plantings and planters, and therefore, when we reach the sidewalk, as you're going by, it's at a similar height. If we were to raise that up, that just moves that wall and transition closer to the sidewalk, which we thought might be a little more uncomfortable. These courtyards are quite large and quite usable for the intended need. So our thought was the areas that are in the lower portion were to be enjoyed by looking at and things like that. But if you're actively using them, you're up on one of the upper planes. That's not being said that we couldn't, berm it out and grade that up to increase the size. But that was our starting point. And I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, thanks. I think I got to be honest, and I'm going back to understand the vertical transition there. I didn't quite see the detail, but yeah, good to hear that your intent is that it is probably more useful for looking than it is using, because I would tend to agree. And so, yeah, I think it's it's a consideration. I don't have a strong solution. I appreciate your response on it though.
Thank you.
That's my second round of questions for now. If no one else is going to go, I would like to make a motion, but I'd like to hear what Shane has to say.
Okay. Shane.
Thanks. So I think just to start with some positives, I think the development of what you've done in the courtyards looks really nice. I think they look like really pleasant spaces to be in. And it looks like you are like making significant investments in those spaces, in those very human-centric people spaces. So I think that's great. I've always liked the Badger Alley idea. And again, it's evident that you're making some significant investment in that space. I think previously, some of the concerns we've communicated to you really stem from the fact that sometimes we can hear the best intentions for these, but if the design doesn't necessarily lock in the intention with a physical object, they don't always get programmed or used the way we see them described. So that, I think, was part of my initial concern, because I love this almost Wooner idea. I do think that the pavement is critical to that type of space. I'm fine with the fact that it doesn't flow out into that excuse me, that top lot. But I would caution on the use of colored concrete, especially the ones that tint more towards the red or pink color. That's definitely not what we want to see. I have seen and used pavers very successfully in vehicular spaces. But I've also seen them fail in vehicular spaces, to your point. So I'll acknowledge that. I think the paver would be a nicer investment to it as more of a pedestrian space than a vehicle space. In general, so that the comment I was going to make about the center spine was that it felt like, with the outer edges, designed more as a parking lot than a streetscape. And I think the critical piece of that being parallel parking along a roadway rather than kind of 90-degree perpendicular parking. So I was going to suggest that you consider going parallel parking through that center spine south of the Badger Alley Plaza. However, now that I see these green blocks on our screen, I think I'm rethinking that. I guess I could also see it being successful the way you're proposing it, where it is more of a flex space with some very large pockets of green space. I'm wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what you see those green rectangles as. Is it just is it plantings and trees, or is it something else?
We haven't gotten into the further design, but yes, it would not be essentially lawn, because I don't see those areas getting a ton of lawn-like use. It would be more tree-like areas of planters. The idea of doing some rhythm that meanders back and forth. Your suggestion about parallel parking does give a nice different vibe to that. The question is, would that then again feel more like a street? But it did perk my interest when you said that. But yes, the idea for the final design would be something that would be honestly more to be enjoyed by those in the building looking down, so it looks more park-like and it's interesting, versus an area for, let's say, where they set up the cornhole.
Okay. Yeah, I think in my opinion, you've tipped the balance with the proportion of green space in the center. So thank you for kind of addressing that reduction in the parking stalls. My initial thought was that you have vehicles parked right up to sidewalk with no kind of buffer terrace between them at the front bumper. And then you have a fairly narrow like foundation planting along the buildings. So going parallel would allow you to have that more like streetscape terrace buffer between the car and the sidewalk. But as I said, I think, in my opinion at least, you're tipping the balance towards more of a truly like flex space in the center. And I think you've convinced me that that could be successful. To Cliff's point about the tree sizes, I do just want to make a note on that because I didn't see the sizes in the packet submitted. I think for an ornamental tree, you should be using a 1.5 to 2 inch caliper. For a shade tree or a canopy tree, you should be using a 2.5 inch at a minimum. So with that, I think that covers, sorry, just looking back through my list here now. I think that covers all my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Russell, were you inching toward a motion, or or Shane giving some of our other commissioners more to think about and comment on? No? Russell?
Well, Shane always gives. I think that I appreciate Kevin's introduction. I just want to be clear on my understanding is we've been asked by the Plan Commission to make advisory recommendation again to them. Is that a fair summary of our basic action here?
I believe you're actually making a kind of final recommendation for staff to prepare the sign off. So Plan Commission approved the project condition on UDC reviewing it one more time and providing comments. And so my understanding is the intent is that would become a condition of approval that staff would then sign off on as part of permitting or as part of the permitting process.
Thanks, Kevin. I'd like to make a motion for that advisory recommendation. Given that this is a nice building, I think there's a lot to we talked about that we like about this project. I do appreciate the applicant making related to Badger Alley, or at least the clarifications. I think that goes in the direction of meeting some of their site intent and goals, and then also the added green space in the interior spine. Discussing. That's my motion.
Okay, so that's a motion for final approval. Is there a second on the motion? Jessica, seconded by Jessica. Any discussion on the motion? Kevin?
I just wanted to clarify my sound. I just want to make sure that I understood Russell's. Were there conditions or any sort of additional notes? I just want to make sure for the good of the record that I got all that.
I would ask that Shane's recommendation on the increasing the side of the shade trees be a condition.
And I would just comment on any of that to make sure that we're not doing anything that would be inconsistent with code, but so long as it's not in conflict with the zoning code requirements that were referenced earlier, we can add that if that's the will of the body.
Do I need to tell you that I accept that friendly amendment?
No, I'm the chair. I can make that suggestion myself. All right. See, any other further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, seeing no hands raised, then by unanimous consent, you have final approval. Thank you very much for your attention to all the detail and your responsiveness to the landscaping. All right, that brings us now back across town to 825 Badger Road, where we have an informational presentation on additions and renovations to Station 6.
Thank you, Chair. I will just note the speakers. We've got several speakers with us on the development team, and it was updated. I believe we have one speaker, and I will just clarify. Ryan Frank is going to be the presenter this evening, and then available to answer questions would be Wesley Reynolds from OPN Architects, Kevin Yeska from JST, Amy Scanlon from City Engineering, John Evans from City Engineering, Assistant Chief Wavery from the Fire Department, and District Chief Buckner from Madison Fire Department as well. And so
I hope that covers it.
So one speaker and several available to answer questions. Julie, do we have any other late registrants on this one?
No, we do not.
So with that, I will pull up the screens, or I will pull up the plans and advance the slides here in just a moment.
Great, thank you. This is Ryan Frank with OPN Architects, making sure you can hear me just fine.
That's right, we can.
Okay, we'll wait for the presentation to be pulled up. So thank you for having us as part of the meeting tonight. This is our informational meeting for Fire Station 6, located just off of Badger Road and Park Street near Madison's College South Campus. We provided an overview to the project within this presentation that kind of goes into more detail of our development and process to this point, as we've completed schematic design and are moving into design development in the next phase of the project. So I don't want to spend too much time on the process. So if you would advance to slide 16, where we have our current site plan, that'll get us into the nuts and bolts of our design, and you can keep advancing. Here we go, current design. So as you see here, plan north is up Badger Road and Perry Street, with the existing Fire Station 6 located on this site. This is an extremely tight site, and what we're trying to do is meet the future growth needs of the fire department, improve the health and safety there in the station. To meet those needs, we're looking to improve parking and add an addition to the plan west of the building, adding an additional apparatus bay, turnout gear storage, dirty restroom, exercise room, and really expand some of the interior functions of the apparatus bay. Currently, the fire department exits out onto Badger Road with pull-in lanes off of Perry Street, so they can circulate around the building. Our additional apparatus bay, you can see in the hatched area, that would be a back-end bay only from Badger Road. And that additional bay is being added as there's a desire to add a second company to the future growth of this station. We're looking to improve parking, not only for firefighters, but also for the community. There is a community room as part of the plan, and so trying to allow the parking lot to satisfy additional parking stalls and maximize it to the greatest extent possible. Stormwater management will be improved on the site, as we're looking to regrade the parking lot and provide a new fresh paving, as well as providing permeable pavers within part of the parking lot to meet some of our stormwater infiltration requirements in that area. Ultimately, we're really trying to keep the existing building as is, improve the parking, improve site flow, improve parking, and allow the addition to occur to the west of the building. If you advance to the next slide, the landscaping plan, this is preliminary in nature, but just to show a general concept. We are removing several trees that are reaching end of life, some kind of crab apples within the parking lot area, as well as some additional trees along the west where the new addition will take place. So we're looking to remove those and add some new additional trees at the perimeter of the site to screen some of the parking and entry to the building. We advance to the next slide. We then started to explore our building massing. We went through several iterations with the fire department in the city. Advance the slide. Ultimately, there was one selection made. If you advance again, this next slide starts to show how our concept kind of came to life and what we're trying to do as far as the building. Ultimately, we're trying to provide a new identity along Badger Road, which is like the front, which is what you're seeing here with the overhead doors. We're trying to improve transparency in and out of the building by refreshing the front of the building from kind of solid overhead doors to full glass doors. We're trying to keep the scale low as the building comes out to the street front and to the sidewalk. Trying not to let the building get too high, but we do have some requirements on the interior to allow for mechanical space and exercise equipment, where you'll see that we're expanding up a bump out on the plan on the right side of the building here to allow for that additional space. That kind of orients the massing of the building. Advance to the next slide. We'll then just walk through our material palette. This is preliminary, but we're looking to tie in some of the existing brick of the building, accent with some new larger brick that would form more of a base course to some metal panel that would wrap the addition, and then tie in our window systems to match the existing building with a dark bronze frame. As far as the existing building is concerned, we're trying to limit the impact or renovation that we're doing to the shell of the building and work within the existing footprint, so that just to minimize cost and allow the addition to really shine. Advance to the next slide. This is the existing building as it kind of sits today as a view from an aerial view from Badger Road. Next slide. You then see how our new massing is starting to just nicely come across the front of Badger Road, provide a little new identity, tie in nicely, keeping a really clean and simple design that doesn't compete with the different brick patterning that's happening in bay windows and gable roofs of the existing building. You see the overhead doors are providing transparency in and out of the building and an opportunity for new signage. The bump up on the right, that's the orange, that would be tying in some of the orange brick from the existing building to the new addition and allowing for that larger mechanical space and exercise room. I think we can probably just advance through the next slides here, and we'll see how the materials and massing work along the different elevations. This is from Perry Street. So the larger bump out, there'll be mechanical louvers, some clerestory light into a workroom. View from the south. This is where the pull-in bays occur, again, off of Perry Street. This is more from the parking lot backside of the building. We're looking to enclose our trash and outdoor storage. We're removing a shed that's on site and trying to incorporate that into an indoor trash enclosure so that that's concealed from the site and to clean up the perimeter. And then along the parking lot side, we're trying to provide a new identity for the community entry and the fire department entry, and to distinguish between those two spaces and let those act differently. So providing some signage to those entry points. All of the brick here, though, that you see in the banding and the windows of the kind of left side of the building is existing.
You're welcome.
So,
okay, who's
hopefully
next?
yeah.
I know we had a number of registrants.
I think that was all as far as speaking, Cliff.
The rest are just here to answer questions then?
Yeah, so this was our kind of informational, just to update you on where we were and hopefully get some feedback and things to consider as we move forward into the design and material exploration and site plan finalization.
Okay, nice presentation. Condensed. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? No. Russell.
I agree. Nice presentation. Thank you. The Badger Road facade, you're clearly making a uniform kind of overhead door heights, which, I assume that's just the functional requirements, now. But anyway, the south elevation, you're not proposing to really do much with you're proposing to, I think, leave the existing. I just wonder, I recognize that you're trying to give that new identity look, which I liked, but is the south elevation not also a fairly visible part of the building? And any thoughts or considerations there for kind of doing something consistent on that side as well?
Sure. I think there's a thought that yes, this is the entry to the parking lot, so it is a visible side, but maybe not quite as visible to everyday traffic along Badger Road. And as far as we were really trying to provide new overhead doors that would allow that transparency and light, but minimize construction costs of providing new canopy or extending some sort of extension over those overhead doors. So really it was meant to be efficient with our addition and manage our costs.
Okay, thank you. I think it doesn't really offend me. If I could share an opinion, part of me likes that you're not modifying it if it's don't fix it if it's not broken. So anyway, but just curious. Thanks to hear your thoughts on it. Those are my questions for now.
Okay, thank you. Lois.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I'm wondering the bump out, the addition form of the brick. There was a diagram that it looked as if the roof of that was tilted back toward it had a pitch on it, and the pitch appears to be gone now. Is that true, or is it still pitched?
That is true. The diagram during that phase, of the design, we were looking at a pitched roof, and as the design evolved, we eliminated the pitch due to some. Really, it was because of the height that was needed on the interior of the space was making that mass too tall. And by flattening the roof, we were able to kind of keep that mass lower and in a better scale and proportion to the rest of the building.
Okay. Yeah, I liked the pitch. I thought it helped kind of balance the other side of the building a little bit. But with that, I think some of the detailing of the roof edge would want to be mimicked as well. It looks a little foreign to me the way it is now, and I'm wondering, if the brick is really worth it, because it doesn't really match any of the form of the original brick, any of the style or anything. I'm just wondering if that becomes a non-brick element, so it really just continues that more modern look. Or do it in brick and do that the dark, the black form.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity to explore, what that material wants to be. Mm-hmm. We had considered, not doing the bump out at all and extending just kind of like this metal panel band around the entire building as kind of one single story mass. And it was very nice and clean, and it really distinguished between the new and the old. I think what we're working with is trying to understand our keeping our mechanical equipment on the interior of the building. We're filling that space. So, but looking at a different material could really, mm-hmm. solve that problem possibly. Maybe it's the darker brick, or mm-hmm. maybe a different metal panel size or something that we explore.
Yeah. So that's my only comment.
I think the brick, though, will, if it's developed, can help make this look the building more cohesive, less like a 2021 metal panel addition tacked onto a 1980s postmodern firehouse. And so I do think there are some opportunities with the brick to tie it all together, you know, because the original building has bays and some bump outs, and this can be a modern interpretation of that. So I encourage you to try to develop that a little bit more, and maybe not abandon the brick, but look at some options like you were saying with color and stuff.
Yeah, I do
banding.
think when you look at the elevation directly, that kind of west elevation, the proportions of it, you know, and the breaking up of that mass is really nice. And so what the brick does there, and now it's, okay, how does it relate to the rest of the building?
Yeah, I agree. It does look nice in this elevation. I think it's when you're seeing the whole that it
right.
It's just a little bit of a miss. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, Shane and then Russell.
Cliff, just a public service announcement.
Yeah, is that a tornado siren I'm hearing?
Tornado siren that seems to be going on.
I have it as well.
Okay. Wait a minute. Is Alder Aboris still in his car? No. Oh, good.
Nope. Quick head count.
Okay.
So I'll make my comments very quick. I see that big flat roof. I'll just make a plug for it as a potential green roof. It looks like a nice canvas for something like that, especially as you think about PR and imagery from Badger Road and that view. It might add kind of a nice element to the composition, as well as help you. There we go. As well as help with the stormwater. And then a couple other landscape comments. I think let's refresh the landscape and use bark mulch instead of stone. And then I saw some of the birch trees noted on the landscape plan, and I would just suggest you think about some like substantial long-lived trees like a swamp white oak along that Badger Road frontage, rather than the birch, you know, something larger and more long-lived. So maybe a Kentucky coffee tree, maybe a swamp white oak. Those are my suggestions. That's all for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Russell, was your hand raised before?
I was just going to report that I was getting a tornado warning.
Oh, all right. Hightail.
I mean, the local, you know, siren isn't going off. It's just my cell phone. Maybe my cell phone is crazy. I had some comments. I don't want to. I like the project. I look forward to seeing it again. That's all.
Thank you. I guess my only follow-up comment would be just to be sure the signage is okay with the sign ordinance. It's very iconic. I think it looks good, and also I think Madison Fire Department has a shield, a standard shield that they want on each and every station. Show kind of incorporate that into the design as well when the project comes for final approval. We don't approve signage, but we just want to be sure that you know that the signage that you're indicating can actually be done, since it contributes so much to that Badger Road side of the building.
Great, thank you. We had a couple comments that were part of our introductory memo. I think that was regarding to the building materials as the kind of current zoning, I guess, had stated that, you know, metal shall not be used as an exterior material for the building. And we just wanted to understand and that what the UDC's the kind of position on that and request that, you know, metal panel be an option for this building.
And Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, it's at least in some districts it's permitted in as an accent material.
Correct. Yeah, this is in Urban Design District 1, and there is essentially a finding that UDC would need to make. It's noted in the staff report, essentially metal is not allowed unless the commission makes a finding that it's part of an exemplary design. And so it would be a finding UDC would make. It's come up on other projects in UDD 1. And that, I believe, may be the only urban design district that has that prohibition on the use of metal.
And I'm not sure if I interpret the drawings correctly, but I think we would discourage the metal to come down to the ground. I can't tell if that's masonry or not, but I think that would probably be our recommendation. That would be my recommendation, and it might be the recommendation of the commission as well.
Sure, and that is the intent, that there would be a stone base.
Okay. Yeah, so we do have the latitude to approve the use of a high quality metal panel, particularly when it's integrated in with sensitively with some substantial amount of masonry. Okay. Thank you very much. It looks like a nice sensitive addition on a tight site to a station that is in need of expansion. We look forward to seeing it soon. All right, that means we are in number 7, business by members. I think the sirens have gone away, at least over here. Russell, business by members.
Educational question for me, being a new member, but I took it as maybe some good sarcasm from Cliff. But does the motion need to acknowledge a friendly amendment or not by the chair?
From a Robert's Rules standpoint, any amendment to the motion it's not, once a motion is made, an amendment to that motion is with the body and not the maker of the motion itself. My understanding as it went through was unanimous consent that the body agreed to that emotion, and I think that was what Cliff was stating. But essentially, once a motion is made, any member of the commission could propose an amendment, and then the body could vote of whether that amendment becomes part of the main motion or not. Russell, does that answer your
Yes.
there? Okay.
Yes, it does. But the clarification there is that the chair doesn't necessarily have different powers in that scenario, or I'm just Cliff and I mostly agree. So
No. The chair does not have power to unilaterally amend a motion.
Okay. Thanks. I'm that much
per Robert's Rules.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, any other business by members? I think we have our bus tour in a couple of weeks, and then our next meeting is in 3 weeks, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Okay.
In regards to the bus tour, we're finalizing the packet, and that should be out shortly. And I believe that's 2 weeks from tonight will be the virtual bus tour. Again, it's a review for those watching and maybe not familiar. The commission has done bus tours in a bus several times over the last couple of years. This is the virtual equivalent of that, where we will be reviewing several projects that the UDC reviewed over the course of the last couple of years. And so an agenda and materials related to that should be out shortly.
Yeah, we're going to miss you with your karaoke mic and your little and your little kitty amplifier on the bus, Kevin.
Well, we were joking earlier. We were talking about I am not facing backwards and lifelong battle with motion sickness. This one, I feel like I'll be much less queasy this go round in this format than the typical bus format. But yes, no karaoke machine will be necessary, I believe, for this meeting.
Okay. Maybe next year. Okay, any other business by members? Okay. Great. Well, again, thanks to Tanya and to Stefan and Julie. They're hiding behind. No, they're showing their faces now. Thank you very much for your help. Thanks, Kevin. And we'll be convening in 2 weeks. I guess I do have one question, Kevin. Since we're not on a bus or anything, it's kind of like a virtual meeting. I mean, is there a chair to that meeting?
Yes, I believe.
Since it's combined?
Yeah, well, it's actually not a combined meeting. It is an Urban Design Commission meeting. So you would be essentially chairing the meeting. The Plan Commission is invited as, they've just been extended an invitation, but it's an Urban Design Commission meeting.
Okay, it's not a joint meeting. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, see everybody in 2 weeks. Looking forward to reviewing our projects. And if you do have a chance to go see them in person beforehand, I'd recommend you do that. I think that will help us provide staff with some good comments. Okay, good night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.